Hello everyone, Bill Parish here of GTT Audio, and welcome to the channel today. Well, I thought 2 weeks ago our video with Joe Kubala of Kubala Sosna went so well, we decided to make it a two-part series and bring him back today and actually talk more about the nuts and bolts of the cable. So let's bring him in. Well, here he is back with us.
Hi everybody.
Joe Kubala of Kubala Sosna. And Joe, the last video 2 weeks ago was a nice hit, and I just wanted to bring you back as we had suggested at the end and talk more about the nuts and bolts of Kubala Sosna.
Well, I enjoyed last time and I'm sure I'll enjoy today. Thank you.
You got it. So please tell me about when you and Howard sat down and decided that you were going to create the cable company. What were the development goals?
Well, first of all, we didn't think the world needed just another cable with a different brand on it. If we weren't going to be able to do something different, we didn't feel like it was going to be worth our while. Mm-hmm. So from the beginning, what we felt was there was such a difference between what we heard in most stereos of friends or whatever dealers that we visited from what we heard as live music at, let's say, a Carnegie Hall. So we subscribed essentially to Harry Pearson's absolute sound kind of definition, the sound of a live instrument in a real room, unamplified.
I always use that as well. There's a lot of people out there, including reviewers and friends, who don't necessarily agree with that definition, but I think maybe they take it too literal or, I don't know. To me, I realize that all halls are different, each instrument is different, but it gives you the general.
But when you hear that live instrument, whether you're in Vienna or in Carnegie Hall or in Chicago,
you know it's live.
You know it's a violin, you know it's a cello, you know it. Too many times through systems, you sit there and go, what is that again? And you're not quite sure. Yeah, you're not quite sure. So our goal was if we could develop something that helped that in a system, we felt we could make a go of this. And so we ended up following our ear, basically. I wish I could say we had, equations down on a paper that we were trying to make happen. That wasn't the case. We kept experimenting, built hundreds of cables until we started moving towards the sound that we were looking for. And interestingly enough, after we realized what had happened, we had basically followed almost none of all the accepted ways to build cables at that time. Really? So we did everything differently. Everything. Our ear always took us in a different direction. And lo and behold, we ended up with a cable that we felt was in fact different.
Well, I guess that's part of being brutally honest with yourself when you're listening. There's not, when you're making different, when I evaluate equipment, I have to it could be a beautiful piece of equipment
that you want to like.
That I want to like, but that doesn't matter what I want to like, because to me, audio equipment, cables, etc., are tools to get to my ultimate goal, which is to recreate a live performance in my listening room. Nothing else. That's my goal.
As it was ours.
Yep.
Yep.
That's awesome. So I know that you guys actually measured cables. You had a laboratory that were measuring your cables, sort of how YG does things by measurements, and then they check it with ears. You guys, the same thing, but just flip-flopped. Your ears led
both were part of it.
Your ears led you down the road, and then you took and measured what you heard to kind of keep you in check.
We wanted to make sure that what we were hearing made sense. Mm-hmm. And so we sent out our cables. We sent out, in the development process, we sometimes came to a fork in the road, and we decided to do one thing. We also sent these cables out to see what would happen. And then we had, I think, a half a dozen or 8, whatever it was, competitive cables that we tested. And it is interesting what happened when we got those tests back. We tested the cables at multiple load points, meaning input impedance and output impedance. And it actually surprised me the degree to which cables changed their character from one load point to another. And so we'll have on the screen in a moment, we'll have a look at a square wave and how it makes this turn up on the corner. And you will see that cables can sometimes make a nice turn, and other times with a different load ring or really slow down, either creating muddiness or creating what I call false dynamics. When the ring occurs, it's gone higher than it should. It should have done this. It's gone higher, and so it feels like they're more dynamic, but I'm going to exaggerate. It also introduces a lack of purity that we hear as a little grunge kind of sound, because you hear that ringing. And luckily enough, with our cables, what we found is at all the different load points, it might have been a little more slightly rounded or a little more square, but everything was basically a square wave, no matter how we loaded the cables down. The other thing we found out was we took all the cables, and low capacitance was a design goal that everybody was looking to achieve. And so we plotted capacitance and inductance on cables, and basically all the cables went somewhere up to the right, your right. And then we plotted our cable, and it was just the opposite. So we were basically a low inductance design, which also meant a very low characteristic impedance design. So our cables are very easy to drive.
You know, Joe, every time I look at an amplifier, a preamplifier, a DAC, a CD, any piece of electronics or speaker, there's all these measurements, there's all these specs. There's never any with cables. Why not? And then there's tons of cable reviews, but there's no even magazines out there measuring the cables. Why not?
Well, I'll go back to the lab tests that we did.
Mm-hmm.
And we did there was a lot of data that came out of those tests for us. Not just impedance and capacitance and inductance, but frequency response and phase, etc. And I can tell you that we purchased cables from competitors to have them tested just to see what happened. And I can tell you that there were cables that we know are bright cables. Almost everybody would agree with that. Or dark cables. Almost everybody would agree with that statement. Yet the frequency response curves were essentially flat rulers. So all the cables had flat frequency response. So obviously frequency response was not the data that we needed to tell us how those cables were going to sound to us. Just like, for instance, one of the questions I get a lot is, are your cables copper or silver? Now, I could answer that in one word, right? I would take 20 minutes to say, do you mind if I don't answer that question? And I'd get a why, and I'd say, because it doesn't make a difference. Well, how could it not make a difference? I said, because it's a recipe that goes into creating a cable, just like it's a recipe that goes into creating a good meal. You're going to prepare a steak. If Bill and I were given a steak, and Bill and I were given seasonings to work with, I might choose to use some seasonings, he might choose to use others, I might choose. Our steaks, although we started with the same USDA steak, are going to taste different.
Mine's going to taste better.
His would taste better. Trust me, I know this. But when we go to a restaurant, we don't say to the chef, please give me your recipe before I decide if I'm going to order your steak. You order it, you either like it or you don't like it, you either order it again or you don't the next time you visit. It should be the same thing with cables. Cables are a recipe. So we can take copper as an example, and we can put different dielectric on it, different thicknesses of dielectric, how many bundles that we have, what do we do with those bundles? Do they run parallel? Do we twist them around each other? All of those things affect sound. And when you're done, it wasn't because there was silver in it or because there was copper in it. It was because of the recipe. And so we just encourage people to listen. One of the things we've benefited from over the years is when people hear our cables, there's no confusion in their mind. They sort of go, that's what I want. I like that. And Bill, you can,
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So regardless, you verified things through measurements, but regardless of measuring or regardless if there's copper, silver, gold in there, that doesn't tell you how it's going to sound?
it doesn't tell it how it's going to sound. And because we've taken a different approach, because we're based on more low inductance than low capacitance, et cetera, does that mean we're going to sound better? Well, I'm here to tell you, no, it doesn't. It means we did something different. It doesn't mean we did it better necessarily. You need to determine that for yourselves. And so we didn't figure out the one true way to make a cable. We figured out a way that we feel results in a damn good meal, if you will, a damn good recipe. And we encourage you to listen for yourselves.
Awesome. Well, there's 10 different SKUs out there. I say that there's a price point for everybody. I said it in the last video, Joe's cables will really compare with another company's brand, another brand 3 to 5 times its price point. And if you think I'm kidding, call me up and let's do an audition. All right. So,
Excellent.
Joe, thank you very much
You're
again
welcome,
for
Bill.
coming. All right.
Take care, everyone.
Take care. Well, I thought that was just terrific. Again, thanks to Joe over at Kubala Sosna. One of these days we'll get Howard in here and we'll bring him on the channel. But for now, we'd like you to like, share, subscribe, and comment below. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks.